Okay. Okay. Right. Yes. We can now continue. But before I actually pick up from where I stopped, can someone out there, people, anyone to lead us in an opening prayer, and then we begin? Anyone? Yeah, I'm seeing Aggie. Yes, just an opening prayer, and then we begin. Oh, no one who is ready to lead us in an opening prayer? Okay. Okay. Okay, if there is no one ready, let us try to have a very brief opening prayer here. Loving Heavenly Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help us as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you will clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, I have prayed. So let us now try to begin this. I've actually been telling you that we are looking at instructions, and I've been telling you that instructions are so much important. Failure begins with failing to interpret the instructions. The moment you don't read the instructions right, so your chances of failing are high. Now, I've been telling you that I believe the teachers have been telling you that the moment you open up a question paper like this, you read the questions more than once. Read the questions more than once. For example, you might read, you keep on reading as you begin up your work. I know you must have been told that we have to plan. The moment you get your question paper like this, read it through more than once, then choose the questions, select the questions, then you plan also, because planning is also much important. Okay, now, as you are writing, you've already chosen the questions. Keep on referring to the question. You write a point, go back and look at the question. You write a point, go back and look at the question. How is it important? You might be misled somewhere. And as you keep on looking at the question, in between there, you might realize that, hey, actually, I am off track. Are you getting it? That is the importance. That is the reason why we keep on referring to the question. Okay? It's the reason why we keep on referring to the question. So the moment you get your question paper, you start on your work, do 2 points, 1 point, go back and look at the question. Now, it has been about how we are supposed to be attempting our questions. Now, we've got the questions, they are here. Question number 1 was asking us, okay, how far was Napoleon I a child of the French Revolution? How far was Napoleon I a child of the French Revolution? Okay, now, when you meet a question of that nature, what do you think the question is looking for? Okay, what do you think the question is looking for? How far was Napoleon I a child of the French Revolution? We want you people, before I actually give you my side, may I, anyone who can interpret this question for us? Anyone who can interpret this question for us? Before I give you my side, can anyone out there interpret this question for us? You cannot interpret the question? Okay, now let me try to, Let me try to help you here. This is how you interpret this question. Now, this question is not looking at factors for Napoleon's rise to power. No. This question is not asking you to show the examiner how the French Revolution assisted Napoleon's rise to power. No. This question is actually asking you to look at what Napoleon did. From his domestic policy, from his foreign policies, you get to see what he did, and what he did is supposed to be in line with what the revolutionaries aimed at. Are we together? You look at what Napoleon did, and then you compare it to the aims of the revolutionaries. The revolutionaries that took over power in 1789. Are we together? So we look at that, and then this question is two-sided, because you are seeing how far. The moment you see how far, automatically there is another far. Okay, so after looking at how Napoleon, okay, was a son of the French Revolution, then you look at the other side of how we can refer to him, or of how he deviated from the aims of the French Revolution. So that is what the question wanted. Okay, so many people misinterpret this question by actually thinking that this question is looking for how the French Revolution assisted Napoleon to rise to power. Of course, that is not what we are looking at. The moment you meet a question of that in nature, now that is the interpretation of the question. Now, after seeing the interpretation of the question, then we have to look at how the French Revolution assisted Napoleon to rise to power. Okay. A moment. Now, what do we do in this case? You automatically look at what Napoleon did. Okay. Napoleon to be referred to as a son of the French Revolution. Sometimes this question is phrased differently. Sometimes they ask the extent to which Napoleon Bonaparte was a product of the French Revolution. They might not use that word son, and then they use the product of the French Revolution. Okay. Now, if that is not, if they don't actually bring it that way, then sometimes they might ask you the extent to which Napoleon fulfilled the expectations of the French revolutionaries. All these questions, all these phrases are actually looking at one thing, phrased differently, but looking at the same content. Okay, how did he fulfill the expectations of the revolutionaries? How can we refer to him as a product of the French Revolution? How can we refer to Napoleon as a son of the French Revolution? The extent to which. Okay, now we look at what he did. Talk about beautifying Paris or beautifying France. Yes, he did this, and this is one of what the revolutionaries aimed at. Okay, he did so many things, by the way. When you look at the division, he actually took on we can before we look at the division, we can look at the Code Napoleon. Okay, this is a system in which Napoleon wanted a uniform law for all the French citizens. And if you remember very well, in 1791, the revolutionaries had also come up with a constitution for France, meaning that they wanted France to be ruled according to the written down laws. So Napoleon took up that, and automatically that shows he was a son of the French Revolution. He did exactly what the revolutionaries wanted. Okay, we can also talk about now the divide, the retaining. Remember, France was divided into 83 departments. This was done by the revolutionaries, and Napoleon maintained it. Okay, 83 departments. Then the departments were also subdivided, and the division, the different areas that were divided. had prefects who were actually taking over, who were governing these areas on behalf of Napoleon Bonaparte. So he took on what the revolutionaries had started, dividing up France into departments. Okay, and each department had to have a prefect, and these prefects were ruling on behalf of Napoleon Bonaparte. So he took it up, he took it on. Therefore, we can still refer to him as a son of the French Revolution. Okay. Now, I don't know whether someone there has something to tell us about how we can refer to Napoleon as a son of the French Revolution. Could you be having any other point? Yes, I still have more points I'll give you, but I would also like to hear from you. Yes, I would like to hear from you. I have Dexter. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, we can say that Napoleon was the son of a French Revolution in a way that he attained his way to power through the Brumaire coup d'etat, where he defeated the Directorate government in 1795.
Okay. Thank you, Dexter. But now you've actually gone to the side of how he came into power, how he became the leader of France. Okay. And this question is maybe looking at what he did that was in line with the aims and the desires of the revolutionaries. Are we together? That is why you see, I am looking at what he did, and then I actually relate it to the aims of the revolutionaries. Are we together? We look at his domestic policies. We look at what he did at home, and that was in line with the aims of the revolutionaries. We can also look at what he did externally. If it was in line with what the revolutionaries aimed at, still we can refer to him as son of the French Revolution. Okay? Yes, any other person with any contribution? Any other person with any contribution? Okay. Now we can also talk about Napoleon carrying out reforms in the education sector. Okay? Napoleon carried out reforms in the education sector, and this was in line with what the revolutionaries wanted. Okay? He made education free and open to all. Okay? Free and open to all. And it was based on career open to talent. Are we getting that? He emphasized the free education. And the revolutionaries also aimed at this. Okay? The education system. People to, we are saying the education that he carried out was based on career open to talent. Are we together? Now, Napoleon built primary, secondary, and technical schools, as well as, primary, secondary, and technical schools. Are we getting it? In 1806, he founded the University of France with the 17 academies all over France. Okay, so this was therefore in line with what the revolutionaries wanted, and therefore we can refer to him as son of the French Revolution. Okay, so I think you've seen that. You've seen the way I've explained it. Are we together? Look at what he did. Was it in line with what the revolutionaries wanted? If it was in line with the aims of the revolutionaries, then you can easily say he was son of the French Revolution. I believe that point is clear. Right? Have you got that very well? Okay, I believe you've got that very well. We can also talk about another thing that Napoleon did. We can talk about the Code Napoleon. Anyway, Code Napoleon, I talked about it. The common law. Are we getting it? coming up with a common law. And yes, the revolutionaries also wanted the same. I can only tell you that before France had over 360 codes of law. Over 360 codes of law. Are you getting it? But now Napoleon came up with a common law under what we call the Code Napoleon. And this is in line with what the revolutionaries wanted. You remember I told you in 1791, the revolutionaries had come up with him a written constitution. Okay? They had come up with him a written constitution. What else can we talk about? We can talk about can we talk about the concordat? The concordat, reconciling with the church. But again, the revolutionaries did not actually reconcile. Actually, the revolutionaries just worsened the situation. We can talk about, what else can we talk about? We can talk about the Legion of Honor. We can talk about the Legion of Honor. Now, we are saying Napoleon came up with a Legion of Honor, which entailed giving titles and decorations to those that had rendered distinguished services to the state. Okay? Now, this encouraged efficiency and dedication in whatever the Frenchmen were doing. Okay? Now, it led to the development of the state. And this was in line with the expectations of the revolutionaries. Now, when we talk about the Legion of Honor, we are looking at rewarding those that excelled. Rewarding those that excelled. I can only tell you that the revolutionaries started this. Let us just talk about Napoleon himself. It is the revolutionaries that rewarded him simply because he was an excellent soldier. Are you getting it? He took it on. He took it on, that Legion of Honor. And he realized that if it wasn't the French Revolution that embraced career open to talent and he rewarded those that were fit, he wouldn't have become what he became. Are you getting it? So he also carried it on. Therefore, we can refer to him as the son of the French Revolution. Okay? What else can we talk about here? Yeah, by the way, let us look at Napoleon overthrowing the kings. Overthrowing the kings in the different European countries. In the different European countries. If you people remember, there was a time when the revolutionaries had a slogan. Okay? The revolutionaries had a slogan that all people are our friends and all governments are our enemies. You understand? Yeah, that was one of the slogans that the revolutionaries used. That all people are our friends, okay? And all governments are our enemies. Now, do you know what this meant? That they were ready to support the people against the kings, okay? Ready to support the people against the despotic kings. The way they had fought their king, Louis XVI. Are we together? Meaning that the revolutionaries were ready to spread the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity elsewhere. And by exporting the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity in other countries of Europe meant that they were ready to overthrow the different kings on the European continent. Okay? Now, Napoleon did that. And by doing it, we can easily say he was son of the French Revolution. Are we together? Now, actually, there was a quotation again, apart from the other quotation I've given you, that all people are our friends and all governments are our enemies. The revolutionaries also had another slogan, that war against all kings and peace to all peoples. Okay? war against all kings and peace to all peoples. Now you can see that the revolutionaries were against the kings on the European continent. Okay? And they wanted to support the people fight against these different kings. Therefore, we can still refer to Napoleon as son of the French Revolution because he took on the principle of extending the ideas of liberty and equality in other countries, all fighting against the different kings in other countries. Okay. In the interest of time, I think we can, that is just enough for that side. But again, remember, we've got the other, however, side of the question. Now, this side has been looking at how we can refer to Napoleon as son of the French Revolution. Now, again, there is another side. How can we refer to him? How did he deviate from the aims and objectives of the revolutionaries? Okay. Now talk about the education he carried out. We can now go back to the education. Remember, he was not interested in educating the girl child. Yet the revolutionaries wanted education for all the people. Now we are seeing him deviating from what the revolutionaries wanted. And therefore we can now hear saying that when we look at this, we can't refer to him as son of the French Revolution. And again, in his education system, he abolished some liberal subjects. You understand? Literature, history, you understand? Philosophy, and he so much encouraged the science. Why was he doing this? He was trying to avoid politicians that would have competed with him. So we can now say we cannot refer to him as son of the French Revolution. Okay. Talk about what else did he do that was not in line. Talk about the censorship of the press. Okay. Napoleon at one time censored the press. And by censoring the press, we cannot refer to him as son of the French Revolution, because this is not what the revolutionaries wanted. The revolutionaries wanted people to express themselves. You can express yourself through the press, but Napoleon was like, all the press, all the newspapers have got to be checked by my people before they publicize whatever they want to publicize. Okay. When you look at the Code Napoleon again, children and women were supposed to be subjects of the father. Like the man was given a lot of rights in a family. You understand? And then at the end of the day, that was not right. It is one of what the revolutionaries fought before. Therefore, we can't refer to him as son of the French Revolution. Looking at that, when you look at the Legion of Honor, when you look at the Legion of Honor, this man created another class. Remember, before the revolutionaries fought the classes in France, the first class, the second class, the third class. Now, by coming up with the Legion of Honor, Napoleon rewarded people, and then these people that were rewarded were now in a different class. Okay, a class of rich people, a class of people that was so much close to Napoleon Bonaparte, meaning that now France had gone back to the class as society, like classes that the revolutionaries fought before. What else can we talk about? When you look at the continental system, the continental system made the people of France to suffer a lot. Remember, the moment he declared the continental system, there was a scarcity of essential goods. Are we together? Scarcity of essential goods. And then people suffered the way they were suffering during the reign of Louis the 16th. Are you getting it? I think you remember the march of women to Versailles, okay, where they actually, where they wanted to talk to the king to reduce the price of bread. And then Marie Antoinette came up and uttered a statement that was not supposed to be uttered at the time. Okay? Marie Antoinette told them, if you cannot afford bread, try cakes. Yet cakes were so much expensive. Now, by declaring the continental system, people suffered. They could not get the essential goods. And this reminded them of the days before the French Revolution. Therefore, you cannot refer to him as the son of the French Revolution, because he made people suffer, which the French Revolution is fought against. Okay? Yeah. I think in the interest of time, we can end that one there. And I believe you people have got the point very well, right? If there is anything that you've not got very well, please, you can tell me, but I believe I've exhausted that question. I've taken a lot of time exhausting it. And the reason why I've spent a lot of time there, because that question is so technical. It is such a simple question, but actually people mystify here. Once they look at that question, they think we are looking at, or we are asking them to give us the contribution of the French Revolution towards Napoleon's rise to power. No, that is not what that question is actually looking at. Now look at question number 2, account for the downfall of Napoleon Bonaparte by 1815. Downfall. Account for the downfall of Napoleon Bonaparte by 1815. Now you look at the factors for his downfall. That question is very direct. It is actually not two-sided. So simple and direct. Are we getting it? And I always tell people that it is better we begin with questions that are single-sided, because they don't have technicalities. You cannot actually fail to interpret such a question. Such a question is very, very direct, okay? And you cannot fail to pass such a question. Now, begin with the Moscow campaign. You understand? Begin with the Moscow campaign. And we know very well, and I remember the other time telling you, that the Moscow campaign was actually a spark of whatever that was not good. All the negatives that happened to Napoleon were major as a result of the Moscow campaign. No, sorry, the continental system. I am talking about the continental system. Sorry about that. The continental system. So when you look at the Moscow campaign, which destroyed Napoleon, was as a result of the continental system. When you look at the Peninsular Wars, these were as a result of the continental system. When you look at the imprisonment of the Pope, attacking the Papal States by Napoleon and annoying the Christians in the world and in France, it was all about the continental system. You understand? And then at the same time, you can also look at the old age exhaustion of Napoleon. You can look at the censoring of the press and how it annoyed the people. You understand? So those are the factors that we can give for Napoleon's downfall. Now, if you've got a point to contribute to this, please, you can contribute. You can add on what I've said, and we keep on going. Any person with any point, any factor that contributed to Napoleon's downfall? No one is willing to contribute? Oh, okay. Aggie? You can...
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
The fourth coalition against Napoleon, 1813, blow to Napoleon's region in Europe.
Yes. Thank you so much. The fourth coalition against Napoleon, indeed, that is true. The fourth coalition against Napoleon contributed to his downfall. You remember powers coalesced and then fought him first in 1813 at the Battle of Leipzig, and then finally defeated. And he was fought in 1813 and then exiled in 1814. Then he escaped from Elba, where he was exiled, came back and ruled France for 100 days, and then finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo and exiled him on St. Helena Island, from where he died in 1821. Okay, So that one contributed a lot. Actually, the fourth coalition contributed a lot to Napoleon's downfall. Okay. Any other contribution from someone there before we switch over to another question? Any other? Okay, Daphne, you can unmute yourself. Daphne, you can unmute yourself.
Morning, teacher.
Good morning. How are you?
So my point is the overwhelming ambitious character of Napoleon.
Yes.
Napoleon was an aggressive man that you could not sit there like watching anything. So I don't know how to explain it, but he was so ambitious.
Yes.
That's why he kept on pursuing like aggressive policies that led to his downfall in 1815.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. The overwhelming character of this man. He was over ambitious. You understand? He took on different activities at the same time. He took on different wars at the same time. He was fighting in Spain. He was fighting in Russia at the same time, fighting the British in what we call the continental system, because he wanted to achieve a lot in a very short period of time. And this, of course, contributed to his downfall. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think we now look at another question in the interest of time. Let us try to look at another question here. And yes, we are going to look at question number 3. I believe we've exhausted that. I don't know whether there is anyone who would like to contribute to that. If there is anyone who is willing to add a point on question number 2, you can add a point. Okay. So I believe we go to question number 3 now. Okay. Okay. Now, question number 3 is, what did the leading statesmen have in mind during the Vienna Congress of 1814 to 1815? What did the leading statesmen have in mind? That question is very simple, you people. That question is very, very simple. The question is asking us to look at the aims of the Vienna Congress. Aims of the Vienna Congress. Are we together? So there you look at, when you are introducing, talk about the Vienna Congress in your introduction. Do not talk about the Congress system in your introduction. Are we together? Don't talk about the Congress system, that this was meetings, different meetings on the European continent. The moment you begin with that, you've already failed. So you tell us, or tell the examiner, that this was a meeting that was held in Vienna, the capital of Austria. It was attended by countries like Prussia, Russia, Austria, and then Britain. Are you getting it? Then talk about the representatives: Castore, Metternich, William of Prussia. You understand? Then later on, Talleyrand of France, who came as an observer. You understand? Majorly that. And then go and tell us the aims of the Vienna congressmen. Now, anyone who is willing to give us some of the aims? Before I give you what I have, we are rushing this. Aims of the Vienna Congress. Aims of the Vienna Congress. Yes, Aggie, you can unmute yourself. Aggie.
Maintain the continental peace.
Sorry?
Maintain the continental peace.
Continental peace. Yes, thank you so much. They aimed at bringing about continental peace, which continental peace had been destabilized by Napoleon Bonaparte and the revolutionaries. We got that. So we can look at another aim, someone else to give us another aim that was about continental peace, which had been destabilized by Napoleon Bonaparte the First and the revolutionaries. By the way, when talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, you add the first there. The moment you just write Napoleon Bonaparte, plain Napoleon Bonaparte, you'll actually be misleading people. There was another Napoleon, by the way. There was another Napoleon, and the people may think you are talking about that Napoleon. I don't know that you've got what I mean. Are we together? Do you know that there was another Napoleon? Have you ever heard of Napoleon II and Napoleon III?
Yes.
So the moment you just say Napoleon and you don't include the first, will be mislead, and you might get it wrong. So, any other contribution? Aims of the Vienna Congress. Okay, the first one we've talked about maintaining peace. Again, they also aimed at maintaining the political map of Europe. Remember, this political map of Europe had been changed by Napoleon Bonaparte and the revolutionaries. So they wanted him to actually redraw the map of Europe. That is what I can use. Okay, we may not actually waste a lot of time explaining each and everything. Then there is also maintaining the old rulers, the ones referred to as legitimate rulers. Are you getting it? They wanted to maintain them. They wanted to bring them back. Those that had been overthrown, okay? Then the Bourbons were restored in France. The Ferdinands were restored in Spain and in Naples, okay? And in Portugal, the old rulers were also brought back. You understand? That is maintaining the old rulers. Then we can also talk about keeping the family of Napoleon out of European politics. They wanted to keep Napoleon Bonaparte and his family out of the European politics because Napoleon had destabilized European peace. You understand? So that one was among the aims of these people. We've talked about the monarchy. What else can we talk about? Maintaining balance of power. Okay, maintaining the balance of power. Some countries had grown so strong against others, so they were like, all countries must be equal. That is why these four major powers were actually sharing the small powers, sharing these small powers such that they can have the same status on the European continent. But remember, they were also doing it wrongly. Otherwise, if they had done it the right way, they would have caused the problems that Europe saw after that. Are you getting it? By sharing the small countries, they neglected the spirit of nationalism. And this contributed to the 1820 revolutions of the European continent, 1830 revolutions, 1848 revolutions, 1859. You understand? So all these were as a result of sharing the small powers amongst the big powers, thinking that they were maintaining power on the European continent, or they were balancing power on the European continent. What else can we talk about? They aimed at economic cooperation, by the way. They aimed at economic cooperation. You understand? So they wanted to, and by that they wanted free navigation on all the international water bodies. Are you getting it? Free navigation of merchant ships on all the international water bodies. But before, this was not the case. Okay. Then what can we talk about? Aimed at what else? Aimed at yes, we can talk about meeting like regularly, maintaining diplomacy on the European continent. You understand? Like they had to solve problems on the European continent peacefully. They were known to solve problems by going to war. That was not the point. Are we together? So that is what we can talk about if we are to look at question number 3. Now, briefly, we can talk about question number 4 before we have our 6 minutes. And I think we can look at this question number 4 in the 6 minutes. Now the question is telling us to account for the collapsing of the Congress system by 1830. Account for the collapse of the Congress system by 1830. Anyone who knows some of the reasons why the Congress system collapsed by 1830? Some of the reasons
The
for the
death
collapse.
of some of its founders.
The death of the founders. Yes, by the way, the death of the founders. Castlereagh had died and then replaced by Lord Canning, who actually uttered a statement that we think killed the Congress system completely. I remember telling you about quoting. If you want to quote, you do it as a reported speech. You may not actually open up the quotes. When you open up the quotes, be ready to give the book you are quoting, be ready to talk about the writer you are quoting, and then the page you are quoting. But if you don't know the book, the writer, the page, at least give it as a reported speech. So it is believed that at one time Lord Canning said that things are turning back to wholesome state, each nation on its own and God for us all. That was Canning, meaning that he was actually disassociating himself from the rest. That statement disassociated the British from the rest of other countries, and that contributed to the downfall or the disintegration of the Congress system. You understand? But we are tagging it to death of founder members being replaced by people like Lord Canning, who actually contributed greatly to the downfall of the system. Yes, and there was someone who wanted to contribute again. Yes, someone had unmuted. Any other contribution? Okay. All right. Now you can also talk about the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte. One of the main reasons as to why these people had allied was Napoleon Bonaparte. Now that Napoleon was no more, why would they keep in an alliance? Are you getting the point? They were not supposed to keep in an alliance because the person they were fighting against him had already been defeated. That is Napoleon Bonaparte. And we can actually say that the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte also contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. You can also talk about lack of resources. Are you getting it? Lack of resources, the money, the army. They didn't have an army that would have implemented their decisions. Are you getting it? And at the end of the day, they had to collapse. Then we've talked about the international army. Then mistrust, by the way, mistrust among the member states so much contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. And if you are to find the mistrust, the other time when I was teaching you, I told you the reason why we so much concentrate on the different congresses. We want to find out the misunderstandings. Now, when you look at the Congress of Aix-la-Chapelle 1818, you can actually get these misunderstandings. Are you getting it? Now, if you remember, Alexander I, of Russia proposed the creation of an international army to suppress sea pirates. That is during the Aix-la-Chapelle Congress, and members were like, that one cannot work. You see, misunderstandings. Are you getting the point? Then I think there was a time when Britain proposed, one time Britain, I think. Anyway, the point is misunderstandings. Okay, I may put something wrong. So misunderstandings or mistrust among these powers contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. Now, talk about the British isolation policy. The British isolated themselves from all other people in the Congress system. Are you getting it? And their isolationist policy contributed to the collapse of the Congress system so much. For them, they were like, we don't have a moral. Now, there was a belief or an agreement between Metternich and the King of Russia that they should suppress all liberal revolts on the European continent. But the British, we are telling them, where do we get the moral authority, okay, of bringing back or of restoring kings that have been overthrown by their people? The people have seen that it is not right to have these kings, and for you are saying we should restore these kings. So the British were like, for us, we are not doing that. Unless there is something to do with our commercial interests, then we can intervene. You see, that is the British isolationist policy and how it contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. Okay. Talk about what else? What else can we talk about? Talk about the selfish interests, by the way. Selfish interests. Some countries had their selfish interests, and they sacrificed international cooperation for the selfish interests. And this greatly contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. Now talk about the outbreak of the Greek War of Independence. Okay? Outbreak of the Greek War of Independence. Now, Britain, France, and which other country? Britain and France majorly supported the Greek War of Independence against Russia. No, actually, Britain, France, and Russia against Austria. Austria was like, no, we are not supposed to support the Greeks to get their independence. But Britain, Russia, and France supported the Greeks. Now you can see the disagreements there. And these disagreements contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. So the Greek War of Independence, 1821, I mean, the war actually started in 1821. And Greece got her independence in 1832. Are you getting it? But the other countries, that is Britain, Russia, and France, supported the Greeks against Austria and Turkey on the other side. So that one contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. Then we talk about maintaining the unpopular regimes, bringing back these so-called legitimate rulers and maintaining them. These rulers, like the Bourbons in France, were not liked by the people. Are you getting it? And then people kept on fighting against these people. The giving of the Italian and German states to Austria by the congressmen also contributed to that, because people kept on fighting. The Italians kept on fighting against the Austrians. The Germans kept on fighting against the Austrians. Are you getting it? And all these ones contributed to the collapse of the Congress system. Okay. Then you can also talk about ignoring small states on the ignoring small states. Remember, we talked about dividing and sharing these small states by the great powers. And then they were neglecting the spirit of nationalism, which contributed to the outbreak of different revolts on the European continent, which finally led to the collapse of the Congress system. So I think we've exhausted all that we had to talk about. Unless someone has got something to say, I think we've come to the end of this meeting. Okay? Unless there is someone who would like to say something, you can put up your hand and then say something. But if you are contented, then I can only say, have a blessed day and a good week. Yes. Okay, I believe people are contented. So I'm only saying,